little bit.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we'd like to open the Township of Ocean Planning Board meeting for December 16th, 2019. First thing we have with the regular meeting, I'd like to call to order, please.
You're echoing.
I don't.
You need that?
Dr. Benedetto,
I'll look at my time.
Mr. DeFilia,
Here.
Mr. Duffy, Mr. Fisher,
Here.
Mr. Good,
Here.
Ms. Close, Mr. Levy, Mr. Sienna,
Here.
Mr. Weinstein, Chairman Hurley,
Here. Salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The notice requirements of the Open Public Meeting Law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township Clerk on July 19th, 2019. There is an emergency exit through the courtroom doors and 2 exits at the rear of the room. Planning Board has a no smoking policy. Also, no new cases will be started after 10:30 p.m. and no new testimony taken after 11 p.m. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean's community cable channel, Channel 22 on Verizon Fios and Channel 77 on Cablevision. All cell phones must be turned off, or if you have a need to make a call, please make your call outside the meeting room. I believe at this time we're going to nominate new members of the Minor Site Plan Subcommittee. I just appoint them? All right. Well, I'd like to appoint Mr. Warren Good as one of the members of the Minor Site Plan Subcommittee, and Peter Ciano as well as a member of the Minor Site Plan Subcommittee. So at this point, I would like to ask those members if they approve the application to place a generator by Flawless Beauty, Block 141, Lot 25, 750 Brielle Avenue, Suite A3 in Ocean, New Jersey.
Chairman, I move to recommend the approval from the Minor Site Plan Subcommittee.
I second.
Okay. Would we take a vote at this point?
Agree?
I agree as well.
All right. So you have a unanimous recommendation.
Right.
Yes. So vote on it.
Right. So would somebody
Yeah, I'll move it.
move to take a vote?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. DeFilia,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Sienna,
Yes.
Chairman Hurley,
Yes. Next, we have minutes for approval from November 25th, 2019. Would someone make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. DeFilia,
Yes. It's 4 pages long.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
It's November.
Mr. Sienna,
Yes.
Chairman Hurley,
Yes. Next, we have a resolution memorialization. Sunset Arcadia Center Incorporated, Block 187, Lots 1 and 5, 1104, Highway 35, Ocean, New Jersey. Would somebody make a motion to approve that resolution?
I'll move it. I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. DeFilia,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Sienna,
Yes.
Chairman Hurley,
Yes. And next we have a resolution memorialization regarding Rising Treetops of Oakhurst, Block 17, Lot 1, Monmouth Road, Ocean, New Jersey. Would somebody please make a motion for approval?
I'll move it. I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. Cecilia?
Yes.
Mr. Good?
Yes.
Mr. Siano?
Yes.
Chairman Romano?
Yes. Next, we have cases carried to January 27, 2020. Number 1 would be Mamano, Block 33.14, Lot 2, 710 West Park Avenue, in Ocean, New Jersey. The next case that's also carried to January 27th of 2020 is 1111 Highway 35 LLC, Block 209, Lot 8, 1111 Highway 35, Ocean, New Jersey. At this point, we have the COA presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to interrupt
Yes.
for a second. Amy, just one minor correction, I think, on the minutes you have down for Dr. Fisher is alternate 2. I don't think it's alternate 2. I think it's class 2. Class 2, is that what it is, Sid?
Yes, it is.
I thought class 2 is the vacant environmental commission spot. That was Fred's spot. He was class 2.
I don't know what class, I don't. Well,
Yeah, I believe that
council
Mr. Fisher is the
representative.
class 2.
I don't know alternate. You're a full-
Your fault.
Full-fledged member.
Okay, we have a COA presentation presented by Mary Beth Lonergan. She's our Fair Share Housing representative, and she will be presenting the Township's third round element and fair share plan. Please proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board members. As the Chairman just said, my name is Mary Beth Lonergan. I'm a partner at Clark Caton Hinds. I'm a licensed professional planner. Mr. Brown, do you swear in?
Yes,
okay.
would you stand and raise your right hand? Promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
So I solely do affordable housing planning work across the state. I work for towns like Ocean Township. I'm also a Superior Court Special Master in affordable housing matters, working across the state as well. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to jump right into.
Can I just interrupt you for a second?
Please.
Is her microphone picking her up for purposes of recording?
Yeah.
Oh, so- Okay,
Yeah.
proceed. Thank you.
I'm going to jump right in. As the chairman just noted, before you this evening is a master plan element, the housing element and fair share plan. It's one of the required elements of your master plan. The board had previously adopted a housing element back in 2011, and that was to address your first and second round affordable housing obligations, as well as to address the standard requirements of the Fair Housing Act as what a housing element has to include. I'm going to try to explain just some of the jargon I'm using. The first round was from the 1980s, from 1987 to 1993. The second round of affordable housing obligations was 1993 to 1999. That's now considered the prior round obligation. The third round started way back in 1999, and here we are, 2019, quite a bit later. COA, the Council on Affordable Housing, had in the past provided fair share obligations to municipalities across the state. At this point, without going through a lot of the background, I've provided all the background on how we are now in the Superior Court. Virtually, every municipality across the state, to address its affordable housing obligations, has filed what's called a declaratory judgment action in Superior Court. You're in the Monmouth County Superior Court. You filed this DJ action, and as part of that filing, the Superior Court judges across the state have really requested and put pressure on towns to try to settle what their fair share, what their three-part fair share obligations would be. Ocean Township did settle with a group called Fair Share Housing Center. That's a statewide affordable housing advocacy group. that settlement was back in the township's governing body entered into the settlement agreement back in the early part of 2019. And that settlement agreement established, without having to go to a full trial, established your fair share obligations. The Superior Court, Judge Linda Grasso-Jones, approved that settlement agreement and also approved your preliminary compliance measures that I'll go over in brief detail that's set forth in the plan. So the actual fair share obligation of the township is you have a 57 unit rehabilitation share. You have a 873 unit prior round obligation. That's that first and second round 1987 to 1999 obligation. And you have a 518 unit third round obligation that started back in 1999 and goes out to 2025. That 873 and 518, that totals 1,391. You have limited vacant developable land. And as part of the settlement agreement and as part of the court approval, the judge approved a vacant land adjustment of that large number and approved it into two component parts. The RDP, the realistic development potential, that's been approved at 280 units. That 280 unit obligation, that has to be addressed with zoning or affordable housing credits that provide a realistic opportunity for the affordable units to be provided. That RDP, as you will see and as you see in the plan, can also be addressed with rental bonuses. It can be addressed with special needs housing, senior housing, senior affordable housing, and so forth. So, as a companion piece to the 280 unit RDP, which I'll go over the various mechanisms that specifically address the 280, you also have what's called an unmet need. And it's, at this point, it's 1,111 units of unmet need. And you have COA's regulation, Council on Affordable Housing, require vacant land adjustment towns to provide some means to potentially produce affordable housing in the future. And they specifically suggest that the court should look at a few different means to help you address that. And I'll go over that in a second as well. I'm going to just, if I may, jump right into the means to address these three component parts of your fair share obligation. So your 57 unit rehabilitation share, that has been fully addressed with the rehabilitation efforts at Whale Pond Village. And as you know, that was initially built by Kay Hovnanian as part of a inclusionary development. And you'll hear me say that a few times tonight. Inclusionary, by definition, is 80% of the housing units are market rate units, and generally anywhere from 15 to 20% are affordable units for low and moderate income households or individuals. Your RDP has virtually almost been fully addressed, and that really is a credit to the township that you have made a point to approve and work with developers of affordable housing. And so you have, as the map shows, and this is just a blow up, and it's titled Affordable Housing Sites, RDP sites and Unmet Need sites. This is a map right from the plan, just blown up. And I'm going to go over table 29 in the plan. That's just a summary of how the township has addressed its combined prior round and third round RDP. Primrose Place is, and I'm just gonna, hopefully I can read my own map, Primrose Place, existing inclusionary development, and there are 19 affordable family rental units there. You have a few group homes in town, and group homes receive credit by the bedroom because the individuals there are really their own households. I have not shown, I don't believe I've shown the group homes on the map, which is for privacy purposes. There also you have built and fully occupied are a few senior affordable units and developments. One is Heritage Village at Ocean, and that's the former Whale Pond Village, as well as Heritage Village at Oakhurst, right off of Park. That's the old 777 West Park Street. There are special needs units at Heritage Village at Ocean, as well as senior affordable rental units. And again, most of Heritage Village at Ocean was to address your rehabilitation share. The Heritage Village at Oakhurst development is 92 affordable senior rental units, and some of them are to address your RDP. Cindy Lane Apartments is just, I think if not, think a final CO may have been issued for Cindy Lane Apartments. That's along Cindy Lane, across from another site that's under construction now, the old BVB site, which is now known as Wayside Point. And Cindy Lane, I'm sorry, I should have said Cindy Lane Apartments is 100% affordable family rental units, and that's administered by Donna Blaze's group. I think it's Monmouth Housing Alliance.
AHA.
Yes, thank you, Affordable Housing Alliance. And then across the way from Cindy Lane Apartments is Wayside Point, and that's that was emanated from a settlement agreement from a few years ago, approved, don't recall which judge, but the court approved that settlement agreement, and that inclusionary family affordable rental development is under construction. You've heard me say affordable family rentals. The town, you were smart in permitting the rental units to be developed because you get bonuses. So a full 70 rental bonuses are in essence a 2-for-1 credit for 70 of the various affordable rental units that you have in town. That helped you to address your 280 unit RDP. The last two sites to address your RDP are two proposed sites. One is Roosevelt Properties along Roosevelt Avenue near Poplar Village. The Roosevelt site, the township had hoped to settle with the owner of the Roosevelt site, and there's still hopes to settle. And I wanted to just bring to your attention that my recommendation on the plan will include that that the board specifically find that the language be changed to require all of the affordable units to be built on site, unless the owner developer enters into an agreement with the township, at which point that agreement will reflect more what the language that's currently in the draft plan, and that language in the draft plan, as a result of a settlement, would allow 2 of the 5 affordable units to be built on site, and the remaining 3 to be provided through a in lieu contribution on a site that the township owns, which is the next and last site which is the Ocean Glades site, which is just to the north of Cindy Lane and Wayside Point. And that site, as I said, is township owned, and the settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center is specifically set up to give the township approximately 1 year till next December to really decide, will you do, and is the site eligible for an area in need of redevelopment designation, or if not, if it's not eligible for the redevelopment process, that the township must sell that property within a certain amount of time for an inclusionary development and also for affordable family rentals. That's and that Ocean Glades site would be looked at to provide 43 affordable family rental units as part of a 218 unit total development there. Those are the compliance mechanisms to address your RDP. If I may, I'm going to spend just another minute or two on the means that the township is proposing to set really as a goal to address potential future means for unmet need purposes. And again, unmet need is it's an acknowledgement that you don't have available land at this time that's vacant and developable to address your full almost 1,400 unit new construction obligation. Again, that almost 1,400 unit new construction obligation has been reduced to a 280 unit RDP. This 1,111 unit unmet need. The court previously approved back in the summer your means to address unmet need. And those means to address unmet need include you have an existing affordable housing development fee ordinance. And I think you have almost $1.8 million of residential and non-residential development fees, as well as in lieu payments from other developers such as Martelli and Toll Brothers. So just the means of having the development fee ordinance, that is one means to address your unmet need. You also have a few extra senior affordable rental units at Heritage Village at Ocean, as well as Heritage Village at Oakhurst, to help you address your unmet need. Generally, your obligation, such as your RDP, 25% of it can be addressed with senior affordable units. So the township has maximized its senior affordable units as well, and the surplus can help you address and go towards your unmet need. I wanted to just touch base also briefly on the overlay zoning that is part of your plan with draft ordinances that aren't for consistency review tonight, but it's part of the plan. And those inclusionary zones include the C1 neighborhood commercial zone, including the Norwood Avenue area. And the thought is there, and you're one of many, many towns across the state that are, again, trying to keep viable your commercial districts and to help and allow residential apartments above. So that will be permitted, residential units above, but the thought is there 20% of any new apartments above the retail along Norwood and would have to be affordable. two other large areas for unmet need overlay zoning is one is the two different golf courses in the township, and there's a
Private golf courses.
yes, thank you, and that's exactly so. COA, Council on Affordable Housing, their regulations specifically say in a vacant land adjustment community, if you have privately owned or member-owned golf courses, they have to have overlay zoning for the time, and the time may not come for 50 years, 100 years, but at such time as the golf courses cease to exist as golf courses, and if they're change of use to residential use, that the development would have to be inclusionary. Again, the majority market rate units and a smaller 20% affordable housing units. And the last unmet need mechanism is the Seaview Square, as you know. The thought there again, just to the north of you, the Monmouth Mall in Eatontown, that the thought is to help maintain the viability of the remaining commercial retail uses, to allow mixed use on the site and to allow some residential use. And it's something that even for Seaview Square, the court-approved settlement agreement gives the township also until next December 2020, to come up with really how you want to see that. Will it go through the redevelopment process? Exactly what uses. But the end result is, if the owner of the mall decides to take advantage of the residential overlay zoning, it will be in keeping with what you, the planning board, and your governing body want to see there. I am just going to highlight a few of the other main parts of the settlement agreement, and just to remind the board, the settlement agreement not only set your fair share obligation, but also it's triggering the timing for this plan before you tonight. And ultimately, the plan will be submitted to court for court approval. Some of the other terms of the settlement agreement is that the township must hire what's called an affordable housing administrative agent, and the governing body will have a resolution as part of its next, I think, January 2020 agenda to approve this experienced affordable housing administrative agent. The settlement agreement also requires expanded affirmative marketing of the affordable units. I've already noted that you have an affordable housing trust fund. Again, you have a little over 1.7 million currently in the trust fund, and 1.9 million is projected as well. Monitoring. The settlement agreement requires annual monitoring of the status of the housing production. And again, you're really ahead of the curve by having the vast majority of your units built or under construction. There's requirements for trust fund monitoring. It must be the monies must be expended for affordable housing purposes, literally for the acquisition of land or for the construction or road construction and so forth. The end result on the affordable housing side of this equation is the township has set itself up for court approval which will give you what's called a judgment of compliance and repose. That's the goal, and that judgment of compliance and repose will protect you from builder's remedy lawsuits through July. I think it's July 2nd or July 6th of 2025. In order to get that judgment of repose, the planning board, you must approve the housing element and fair share plan, and then your governing body would have to endorse it and submit it to court for review and approval at a future compliance hearing in front of Judge Grasso Jones. With that, I will recommend, and I do recommend to the board that you do approve this third round housing element and fair share plan. I believe it fully addresses the requirements of a housing element from the Fair Housing Act of New Jersey, as well as the requirements also from the Fair Housing Act and COA's regulations for what has to be part of a fair share plan. I believe it fully addresses the municipal land use law requirements for the purpose of the housing element. I believe it addresses all of the court-approved settlement agreement terms, and I would recommend it for the board for approval, with the caveat that I would change the language on the Roosevelt Avenue site to, instead of allowing up front just 2 units to be built on site of the 5 and 3 to be in lieu contribution, that all 5 affordable units contemplated would have to be built on site unless the developer landowner enters into an agreement with the township. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or the public.
Any board members have questions of Ms. Lonergan? No? Then I'd like to open this up to members of the general public that have questions for this particular person. Step up. Just give me your name and address. At the D, sir.
Yes, that's fine.
That's the one.
My name is Jack Maybe. I live on Newport Avenue in Oakhurst. I just came to comment on the affordable housing presentation, and one of the things I think we need to consider when talking about affordable housing is not just the cost to purchase or to rent, but also the utilities costs. And there have been a lot of advances, especially in the last 10 years, with sustainable housing and energy efficiency. Notably, I read something the other day that Passive House, which is the highest.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, Mr. Memrick, could you just swear you in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Raise your right hand. You promise to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I affirm.
Okay, very good. Understood.
Proceed.
So, the highest standard for residential today is probably the Passive House standard, in addition to the LEED Platinum. And if you're not familiar, Passive House is basically a series of, it's a standard that basically says that the home or commercial building requires almost no HVAC use, and it gets all of it through passive solar infiltration and radiation, and it has means of like they put certain materials in the home that actually can collect the solar energy and then re-radiate it at night, and therefore requires very, very small amounts of energy. And I was reading something the other day that they're able to now build these projects for about $150 per square foot, which is about the national average of standard new construction. So I believe that when considering these plans, we should incorporate that element as part of it now that the technologies have matured to a point where it's cost effective. And especially if we think about this going into a project, the additional costs incurred of performing these additional steps is not that much, because it's a more holistic approach rather than trying to come in once something's already under construction or retrofitting after the fact. You can incur significant costs because then you have to go and change things around.
So if I could just stop you, because the purpose of tonight's hearing is very focused and narrow. And so I think it'd be appropriate now to ask Ms. Lonergan to comment on your thoughts.
I'm happy to. Actually, you'll be happy to know that the state of New Jersey, through its funding of affordable housing, and you have two great examples right here in Ocean Township, that Heritage Village at Oakhurst at 777 West Park and Sydney Lane Apartments both have significant sustainable means, and the funding came from the state and federal and county governments. I know the buildings aren't LEED Platinum, but I think they are the lower. I think I want to say LEED Gold. With that,
That's the low,
yeah.
one below black.
Yeah, so it could be LEED Gold or LEED Silver, and there are some. I had a chance to go visit both buildings when they opened, and they have some great sustainable features. Not to the level of past. I mean, that's serious. I mean, I appreciate you're saying it's $150,000 construction costs. I'm not seeing those kinds of construction. I'm not seeing the levels. I'm seeing it's still closer to $300,000 per unit construction cost.
I wasn't talking about per unit.
Oh,
I was talking about per square foot.
per square foot. Okay. But suffice to say, you have two good examples of sustainable, affordable family rental site at Cindy Lane and affordable senior rental site at Village at Oakhurst. To the extent that the board is able to work with the township's engineer and planner to encourage inclusionary developers to also bring in sustainable measures, it's got to be offset with COA's regulations and the court's requirements that boards can't put cost generative requirements on an inclusionary developer. So I'm sure
There's a balance that has to be struck.
there does have to be a balance.
Is there any requirement either at the state level or federally that affordable housing has to incorporate some sort of?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because as a member of the Environmental Commission here in Ocean Township, it's something that's on the kind of the forefront of our minds, especially as we look to the future. And me personally, I work. Part of my daily job as an engineer is I work with homeowners, businesses on efficiency, and so I've been involved in these sort of things, and I've seen how the costs have come down over the years, especially with the LED lighting.
Yep.
Where it was a big one.
And what also helps is for the residents of these developments, that their utility costs are much lower than an older, inefficient complex. So the thought is, even with some of the renovations that the state helped to fund at the old Whale Pond Village, which is now called Heritage Village at Ocean, that there was sustainable features as part of that renovation where there was energy efficient appliances and different things brought into the development as well.
The issues that you're talking about, while very interesting and maybe germane for the future, do they relate to the duty and responsibility of the board tonight?
Just in the sense of hearing that that you as a board have the opportunity, that you have already approved such measures, and that you have the opportunity in the future when Ocean Glades or other sites come before you. But specifically, at this, there's no requirement from the court or from COA's regulations that require sustainable features, but state regulations do, and it's already impacted. But yes, the housing plan is more of a 10,000 foot level look down, but it's still important for the board to keep this in mind.
I appreciate that, and I'll say that again. Please keep that in mind as we go forward. And that's all the questions I have.
Thank you for bringing that to us, or that to our attention, sir. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, now, for the record, there are only two other folks in the audience, and I believe they're here for the next application. Is that fair to say? So there wouldn't be anybody else who would be presenting any comments.
Well, we have to close the
Yes.
public comments. So would anybody make a motion to close public comments?
I move to close the public hearing, public portion.
I'll second.
Amy?
Mr. DeFilia?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Good?
Yes.
Mr. Siano?
Yes.
Chairman Barrow?
Yes. At this point, Sandy.
So I'm going to look to our planner. You're asking for one vote from the board tonight, and would you give us the language that you're most comfortable with, since you're working directly with the litigation?
Certainly. So did I think we provided a draft resolution, if you'd like me to.
Yes.
Yep. So I'm looking at, would you like me to read it or
Yeah, why don't you
or
read it,
just
because
summarize it?
everybody doesn't have immediate access to it.
Okay. This is a resolution of the Planning Board of the Township of Ocean, County of Monmouth, adopting the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan as presented tonight. Whereas the Planning Board of the Township of Ocean, County of Monmouth, adopted its current Housing Element and Fair Share Plan on June 27th, 2011. Whereas the governing body endorsed the 2011 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan on July 6, 2011. Whereas the Council on Affordable Housing, COA's proposed third-round rules were overturned by the New Jersey Supreme Court in a case cited here. Whereas as COA failed to adopt new constitutionally compliant rules, the New Jersey Supreme Court entered an order on March 10, 2015 that transferred a responsibility to review and approve housing elements and fair share plans from COA to designated Mount Laurel trial judges within the Superior Court. Whereas the Township filed for declaratory judgment with the New Jersey Superior Court on July 6, 2015. Whereas the Township executed a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, approved by governing body resolution on January 24th, 2019, that identified the Township's three-part third-round affordable housing obligation and a preliminary indication of how the Township would satisfy the affordable housing obligation. Whereas the settlement agreement was subject to a fairness hearing on April 5th, 2019, during which the court found that the settlement agreement was fair to the interests of low and moderate income households, and whereas the court's review and approval of the settlement agreement is reflected in an order on fairness and preliminary compliance signed by the Honorable Linda Grasso-Jones and filed on June 25th, 2019. Said order required the Township to adopt, endorse, and file by October 23rd, 2019, since extended by the court, a housing element and fair share plan and implementing ordinances that are consistent with the settlement agreement. Whereas upon notice duly provided pursuant to the statutory municipal land use law requirements, the planning board held a public hearing on its 2019 third round housing element and fair share plan on December 16th, 2019. Whereas the planning board has determined that its 2019 third round housing element and fair share plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Township of Ocean's 1990 master plan and most recent 2014 re-examination report, and that adoption and implementation of the updated housing element and fair share plan is in the public interest and protect health and safety and promote the general welfare. Now therefore be it resolved by the Planning Board of the Township of Ocean, Monmouth County, that the Planning Board hereby adopts the 2019 third round housing element and fair share plan.
And that's also based on what you call the caveats, is that correct?
Thank you. Yes.
Very good. So now we need a motion.
Can I get a motion for a positive vote to approve this resolution?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Mr. DeFilia?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Good?
Yes.
Mr. Sienna?
Yes.
Chairman Barrera?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Beth. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
We'll see you again, I'm sure.
It'll just take me 2 seconds just to pack up here.
Take your time. Do we have the next council?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
Thanks, Ron.
Coming right in, or do you want a break?
Is it okay if I leave the board here?
Can I help you with that?
Is he right outside?
The applicant was out in the car charging his phone or something.
30 minutes.
Thank you. Oh, 30 minutes.
All right. Well, bring him in.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFiglia, where was the site of your convention or presentation? Oh. Yes. Oh, in New Brunswick. Uh-huh.
Not in the alternative, like in the foyer. But
Okay.
we outgrew the space, so we have to get some more conference oriented venue.
Oh, Mr. Gazarovski.
A little transparent there.
Okay.
I say Sienna. I say you say Sienna. Sienna. Okay.
Your sister
Disappeared.
My baby sister. You know Mike too.
I think so.
There it is.
Clock's ticking.
I don't feel so self-conscious walking. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Gazarovski.
Continuation, I believe.
Continuation of Scott Delaney, Block 35, Lot 5, 1206 West Park Avenue, Ocean, Zoned R1. Mr. Gazarovski, nice to see you again.
Wish everybody a good holiday before we start and get on to this. I think the last time we were here, we basically had completed the testimony, my engineer, and I just had him prepare a couple of exhibits, and I'd just like to call him back get those marked because it may clarify.
Right, of course, he was sworn in last time, so he continues to testify under oath.
Okay. Let me pass this down.
It doesn't matter.
Can we mark the packet, please?
Yeah.
Would it be D1?
No, it would be B2.
B2.
B1
Before you ask her, I'm letting you know.
board packet last.
And we're going to have
It's
Bill.
roll.
Okay, and Bill, could you give us the your report, please,
I was
before
going
we
to make a
proceed?
suggestion. I mean, certainly the prosecution is up to the applicant. They submitted a traffic or engineering type study on the site distances available, driveway, the whole bit along West Park Avenue.
Right.
My report dated today, Mr. Chairman, fundamentally just talked to some of the language and some of the statements in that. It's probably better if Mr. Miskovich just presents his report. I
Okay.
think that's what they were going to do, and kind of address mine as he's going along. And if we need to discuss them in any more detail, we can do that. That way, I'm not taking away the applicant's limited
That's
time.
fine. We'll proceed in that manner then.
So, Mr. Gazarovski, obviously,
But
we're
I
going to
have-
focus in on the report, but your engineer has, what, a couple exhibits?
Take 5 minutes.
And have they been marked before? Have they been submitted 10 days in advance?
They're not new exhibits, they're just colorized versions.
Okay, all right. So what exhibit number are we up to for?
I think really only the colorized one is what we really need, don't you think so?
Well, the aerial photo
It's a blow-up of the,
is a blow-up of what I passed out at the last meeting, so I just brought a larger view. The one I can.
Looks like the same thing that's in here.
So if you're going to pass it out, then we should have it marked. Amy, do you know what number we were up to last
last one
time?
was,
Is that A4?
yeah, possibly.
That's the same thing as last time?
That was the same thing as last time, I just blew it up so that if we referred to it.
Oh, all right.
What is our
If it's
last-
the exact same thing, then we don't have to have it marked. All right.
What was the last exhibit number we had? Let's mark the colored version, A5, and just tell the board what it is. And I'll mark these A5.
Oh, I'm confused. Am I marking this A4 still?
A4.
Yeah.
Okay. And
That'll be A5.
this is just the plot plan that's been submitted as part of the set. This is just a rendered version of it.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Carr, with that colorized version, there is in fact an existing lot which is presently there, correct?
That's correct.
And there is in fact an existing driveway which is there.
Correct.
Can you point that out to the board, please?
The entire lot is.
Sir, could you use the microphone?
Oh, sure can. I could. The entire colored rendering here represents the entire lot. The house in the front on fronting on West Park Avenue, which is on the right side of the plan, is the existing dwelling with the you can see the shaded area with a circular driveway kind of curves in from West Park Avenue, and then it loops around on the bottom or east side of the existing dwelling for a side entry garage. The dwelling on the left side is on the proposed lot in the rear and the driveway that accesses that lot.
With regard to the original driveway, that has been there for approximately.
Gazarovski. Mr. Gazarovski.
You need a mic.
Microphone.
Okay, drawing your attention to the existing driveway on the existing single lot. How long, to your knowledge, if you know, has that driveway been there?
I believe Mr. Delaney testified somewhere approximately 20 years, if I recall correctly.
And that's not being moved, is it?
That's correct. That is remaining.
And you know, there's been some questions with regard to site distances and the like, but the second proposed driveway is in fact further away and has greater sight distances than does the existing driveway.
That is correct.
I have no further questions. I'm gonna distribute that info. Yeah, just give us.
Any other exhibits?
No.
Okay.
Just give all of these.
I do have one question. On the exhibit, you're showing a proposed dwelling on the new lot and also a lot of cleared area and driveway and so on in one area. Is that realistic? Or is that what's actually planned?
No, there is no proposal.
It's
There's no proposal. I was requested by Ms. Fitzgerald to prepare a plot plan exhibit to show what a potential lot may be.
Okay.
And that area in the back there that you're saying is cleared is actually a majority of that is cleared already. So that's kind of why I put the house, the proposed house, and that circular driveway there, because that area, in fact, you can see the 3 clump areas. Those are existing, but some of that is existing open space now.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions by the board?
Any questions by the board for that particular witness?
Also, for the record, there's only one individual in the audience. That's Dr. Delaney. So
Correct.
I'm sure he doesn't have any questions.
That's correct.
So, sir, would you raise your right hand? You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Easier as a cheerleader. Okay, Mr. Miskovich, would you, for the record, please identify yourself and just relate very briefly to the board your professional credentials?
Sure. My name is Frank Miskovich, and it's spelled Miskovich. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. Been licensed since 1977. My educational background is I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering and a Master of Science in Civil Engineering from Newark College of Engineering. I've had about now 50 years experience in area highway and traffic engineering. 20 served in the public sector, where I served 12 years as the Middlesex County traffic engineer. And for the past 30 years or so, I've been in the public sector. The last 6 years I've been on my own. Prior to that, I was vice president of 2 major Central Jersey firms where I managed the highway and transportation department. I've appeared before this board probably 15 years ago.
That's fine. We'll accept it.
Thank you.
Your credentials, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Kozrowski, you heard us mark as B2 the packet. So to be clear, the first document is Mr. Miskovich's report.
Right.
So everybody has all the details. I'd suggest that he just highlight possibly what our board engineer was highlighting, and we'll get right to the heart
I'd like to do
the
that.
issue.
Just to be clear, though, Sandy, the packet had an incorrect printing of my report. There were 2 pages missing, so what was just passed out.
Oh, I see.
We
Okay.
got some copies of the applicant and his experts, and we got some for the board.
All right.
Okay, because for whatever reason, the machine, when Amy was copying, skipped 2 pages.
So for the record,
It's a 4-page report.
Exhibit B of B2 is the report by Mr. Fitzgerald with all the pages, right? Okay.
Okay, Mr. Miskovich, approximately how long ago were you retained by me to prepare perhaps an engineering report, more particularly a traffic study concerning this application?
Well, let me correct that. No offense, but Dr. Delaney contacted me probably about August or so about his application before the board and asked if I would be willing to take a look at this. And I told him, quite frankly, I says, I don't know. I will review the professionals' reports, and I would have to do my own investigation of sight distances, which is obviously the primary issue. I said, before I can render opinion what I can support his application or not. At that time, when I did my reviews, and I said I could. I guess about a month ago, we were at the last meeting, when we were ready to testify. I did not get on. Mr. Gazrowski asked me to put that in writing, my testimony, and submit that to the board for review. And that's what I have in front of you is the December 5 report. And basically, I'm going to quickly highlight it, and I think to try to get into Bill's review letter, which I was handed to it tonight, so I haven't really thoroughly been able to get through it, but I think we can hit the highlights. obviously sight distance is a primary issue at this locations. I looked at this in two ways. Number one, we have a proposed driveway that's coming out to West Park Avenue, and does that have adequate sight distances based upon the guidelines that everybody uses in the industry? The second part is there's also an existing driveway, and is that operating safely given the confines of what we have as far as guidelines, safety in the area, etc. So the first thing, when I looked at the proposed driveway, I measured sight distance along West Park Avenue. I used the profile to see what we had, and I had about 412 feet of sight distance to the existing driveway, and about another 60 feet or 59 feet to the proposed driveway. And what I found when I calculated the sight distance, the required stopping sight distance, I had 412 feet. So the proposed driveway really was in excess of what was required by the sight lines. The existing driveway at the time, when I used the grading of the 7.5%, we can talk about the grade on the roadway in a little bit more detail. I had found that we had about 412 feet or 400 feet of sight distance, where I need 412 feet based upon the operating, well, I'm going to call it the 85th percentile speed of the roadway. And I'm going to have to get into that a little bit more detail, and I hate to bore the board with it. But there's two criteria that we use. One is stopping sight distance, and as Mr. Fitzpatrick, I believe, in his report saying, well, look, we have an eye height of a vehicle, but we also have an object height on the roadway. Too much? What? We have an object height. So there's one thing about traveling on the roadway and a motorist that's traveling, being able to see an object and come to a stop, or at least start to slow down and take an appropriate action. The other is what we call intersection sight distance, and that is being able on a driveway, and I'm using the intersection for the driveway. If I'm coming out of that driveway, can I see an oncoming vehicle? And like vice versa, an oncoming vehicle, can I see someone at that driveway? We try to do eye height to eye height, which we use 3.5 feet as an average eye height. That being, if the two drivers can see each other, then it's up to them to react accordingly. So we want to provide the proper sight lines, and that's what our sight distance in my report is based upon: 3.5 eye height to 3.5 eye height, based upon the AASHTO standards, which we call the Green Book.
What does AASHTO stand for?
American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and they've had a publication, a policy on geometric design, that's been published since 1937, basically the first edition, and it's gone through obviously another iterations throughout the years. And that is a guideline that all the professionals of DOT, Federal Highway, counties and all we use to see if an intersection or a roadway is operating within safe parameters. And they're guidelines. They're not intended as rigid formulas, because they acknowledge that every area might be a little bit different. You can take in local considerations as far as accidents and crash histories if an existing location has been operating safely. It also provides guidance based on operating speeds, design speeds, 85th percentile speeds. And I keep saying 85th percentile because that is the speed at which speed limits are set on the roadways. So Monmouth County, in establishing that 45 mile an hour speed limit, basically used that criteria of an 85th percentile speed. Mr. Fitzpatrick, I believe, had comment about what the Fitzgerald, I'm sorry.
So we all known each other about 35
I apologize, Bill.
That was the problem. He was really a guy named Fitzpatrick.
I read the wrong report. I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
We're talking about the speeds and what's the proper speed. Did we do any speed surveys? No, I did not. The AASHTO guideline, and the current ones use the 85th percentile speed, as I indicated, is to set the speed limits on the roadways. And that's done by the towns, the DOT, etc. The county has established that speed limit. They did not have any records when I contacted them to tell me what the actual speeds were. I contacted the Ocean Township Police Department, the Traffic Safety Bureau, and posed that same question to them about speed limit surveys that they've done on West Park Avenue. They indicated that they don't have any real records of speed limit surveys that they've done in the past several years, but talked to officer and to Nunez, who indicated to me in her experience that there really hasn't been a speeding in her estimation on that roadway. They've been asked to go out to the intermediate school on occasion because that's been the complaint, but they didn't really find anything that would warrant a speeding situation. That is the conversation with here, and I cannot any documentation to say really otherwise, but that's what she relayed to me. So I use the 45 miles per hour as the criteria to establish what would be an appropriate sight distance based on the guidelines. We also look at I looked at the driveway spacing criteria to see if the driveways are meeting the local criteria and the county criteria. West Park Avenue being a county roadway. The township and Mr. Fitzgerald indicated, I think, the last meeting that the town would allow a driveway to be within 5 feet of the property line. So if I were to take 5 feet on this one and 5 feet on the flag lot, I would have 10 feet of separation. We have more than that. Excuse me. We have about 40 feet between the driveways, so we exceed that criteria. The county says you can have two driveways within 25 feet of each other. Well, that 40 feet exceeds that, all right? And if I look at DOT, which is another one, they require 24 feet also. So we meet all that criteria as far as spacing of the two driveways. I would also point out that Monmouth County has given us basically a conditional approval for the two driveways, and they asked for two things. One, a dedication of right-of-way for a future road widening of West Park Avenue. When that would happen, I don't know. I mean, it's not right in their plans. They don't have a schedule, but they have plans for widening the roadway, similar to what would be on the easterly side of Route 18. They also asked for a site triangle, which is a measurement so many feet back from the curb line of West Park Avenue onto the driveway, and a certain distance up West Park Avenue to the left and to the right. We've indicated that within that site triangle, and I told that Dr. Delaney, that we will have to do some brush clearing to take care of the overhanging branches and brush like that. There also may be some regrading within that site triangle to improve sight distances. That would all be part of the county requirement when that site triangle is effectuated. And speaking with Mr. Delaney, if this is approved, those site clearances will be taken care of within that site triangle. So we'll improve some of the sight lines to that driveway to see exiting vehicles. But I think when we're looking at the existing driveway also, and even to some extent the proposed driveway, I obtained crash records from the police department from 2016 up through August 25th of this year to see what was happening on that roadway. And going through the data, which I've included in my report, really found nothing that related to grade, to weather conditions, or to the driveways that are in question. And if I exclude basically the intersections at Route 18 and West Park Avenue and at the Jumping Brook Road intersection, and look at the accidents, almost half of them occurred within the parking lot of the intermediate school. So to me, the existing driveway has been operating safely based on that crash record. And as Dr. Delaney testified at the last meeting, he says he's been there 20 years and has not had an accident at his driveway. I also had the opportunity since the last meeting and tonight to ask for additional crash records to continue from August 25th through December 4th, the day before my report. I did not get that until after my report was submitted. I can provide a copy of that to the board. But basically there were 3 more accidents that occurred. One again in the parking lot of the school. Someone hit a deer. And then there was coming off Route 18, traffic backed up, there's a slight rear end. Again, nothing related to our driveways, the grade of the roadway. So I would conclude from that the existing driveway in its current location has been operating within acceptable safety parameters. I don't know if I touched everything, Bill. I know one of the keys, and we'd have to go through the calculations, but the profile of the roadway varies. The crest of the hill is about in the vicinity of the United Methodist Church, and then it's on a downgrade, but it's not a constant smooth downgrade. It starts out flat, gets a little steeper, and it's varying. So the question is, what grade to basically use? I used the 7.5% grade because that seemed to be the major portion of the roadway. when I did my calculations of the 412 sight distance. And Mr. Fitzgerald's letter dated today, I believe he has,
Excuse me.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, 8.46% within 150 feet of the existing driveway. If I add another 60 feet for the proposed driveway, I've got greater sight distance. So we're going back and forth between existing and proposed. Proposed, I don't think there's any question there's enough stopping sight distance for that 45 mile an hour speed. The existing driveway, even though we might be a little shy if I use the 8.4 per 6, consider it 7.5, there's been no accidents supported at that driveway. And I don't see there's any particular reason why that cannot remain in its current location, given those facts.
Bill?
I don't know if I covered everything, Bill. The main difference, we differ in opinion to some degree. I'm going to say that neither one of us is correct, and neither one of us is incorrect. What I want to say is, there's a certain amount of judgment involved here. So if you read Frank's report and you read my comments regarding it, or my earlier reviews, you'll see that the height of object being viewed by a driver, say, heading eastbound on West Park Avenue, as he comes over the crest and down the hill, could be anything from 6 inches to 2 feet, which is what the DOT, 6 inches is what ASHTO used to use. 2 feet is what the DOT presently uses. 3.5 feet is what ASHTO currently uses. 4 feet, if I is what the county currently uses. So there's a lot of judgment in there. My recommendation was 6 inches, but that's how I design things. I'm not saying, that's why I say, I'm not saying Frank's wrong, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying there's judgment involved. You have to listen to the testimony and make a decision. I can only tell you what I feel as a professional, but there's no right and wrong here.
Let me respond to that, because Bill is correct. The prior issues of ASHTO, going back, and I believe it was 2001, used a 6-inch object. Since then, they changed in that addition to the 2 feet height, which is basically being able to see the taillights of the vehicle in front. Their reasoning was, if you're driving down the roadway, you want to be able to see someone braking or turn signal on. And what the Federal Highway Administration did in that research, and if you read the references that are in there, they found that the crash severity was not significantly different, going from a 6-inch height to a 2 foot height. So again, as Bill says, it's a matter of how you want to design it, but that's a condition of the roadway that the county, one, if that's a concern, can adjust the crest of that hill to make sure of that. But that's dealing with an object that's on the roadway. We're dealing with someone coming out of the driveway and being able to see. Someone approaching from the left, can I get across that road to make the left, where I'm looking, or to make the right turn? That's why I think the sight distances were appropriate. I will also point out that a lot of those studies and the distances go back prior to the 70s, when a lot of this data was developed. And there's factors of safety built into the calculations for reaction time at a certain speed and braking distance, which is basically deceleration rate. How can I fast way decelerate it safely given certain weather conditions? And that has not changed. They've built factors of safety in where they found that 0.64, 1.5 seconds is reasonable. They've gone to 2.5 on being able to see something and react. If you have an alert condition, you need something happens, a deer ran out, your reaction times are much faster. But we went to 2.5 seconds. The studies have gone back on deceleration rates of 11.2 feet per second, all right, squared. But not just leave 11.2 as a thing. That's been on the books for quite a while. But recent studies have found out, and it's not changed in the books yet, but things have changed with the vehicles. There's better suspension. They have anti-lock brakes. So the ability to stop a vehicle has become quicker safely, but we have not changed that particular data yet. Matter of fact, Federal Highway Administration just published something April of this year, 2019, where they talked about variable speed limit signs. Those are the signs you see on the turnpike. When it's bad weather, they show you a reduced speed limit sign. Well, in that documentation, there was research that they did looking at cars with and without anti-lock brakes, with poor tire conditions and good tire conditions. And what they found is that the actual deceleration rates that are safe at those speeds on wet packed snow conditions are like 12.5 per second for poor tires and no anti-lock brakes, to almost 17.5 feet per second with good tires and anti-lock brakes. So there's a big variation to be able to start the car quicker, but we're still on the low side and the conservative side of 11.2. And I'll only point that out because, as Bill mentioned, there's a lot of judgments and variations that go in here. So we're trying to, like, what makes reasonable sense. And I keep coming back to the point, the existing driveway, I think, has the criteria for the sight distance, and we're dealing with the existing driveway. And all I can tell you from experience, if there's been no history of issues with sight lines or the grade of that roadway from a crash experience data, to me that's been operating safely. No matter how you want to measure the sight distance, which I think is, it's marginal depending on what grade we use. But we're within that realm. Sorry to get verbose on that.
Do you have any other witnesses?
I do not.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question for you. So, obviously safety is the big issue here. And I know people come down West Park and you're flying down that road. Is there anything that we can do to make that driveway safer?
Well, I think I pointed out, as part of the county approval, we call a sight triangle. Right now, there's vegetation that goes up right to the edge of pavement, and I think if you go further to the west of this property, there's some grade issues on the property. What the county will require, and we've agreed to, that within that sight triangle, a certain distance back and along that distance, within our ability, and which is a lot of the property, those would be clear to any vegetation to clear the sight line. And if we have to regrade that property to get it lower to improve the sight lines, we will do that. So, and there's an enhancement, if you will, to provide greater visibility to someone coming out of the driveway. Because I'll be honest, as of now, with those pillars there, it may be hard with the vegetation, but I think that would definitely be an enhancement and improvement to clear that sight triangle.
If I may, because we've recently had a subdivision that had the very same issue, where the driveway came out onto an existing road, and the curvature, not the vertical this time, the horizontal curvature was not good, and so clearing the sight triangle on the applicant's property didn't take care of the situation where you couldn't make adjustments within the sight triangle on other properties. So they had to go get an easement. Is that the case here? Is there anything on the property to the west that, for all the work you do on this property, would still be an impediment to safety that you have no control over?
I'm gonna look at Exhibit A5 because I did look at that before, but there is a sight triangle
Frank,
that's put on there.
We need,
We need microphone.
Microphone.
You need a microphone. Then he can't take it.
We can't do both. No, you can only go so far.
Point.
Yeah, it's it. No.
Pretty much is the whole sight
And he's
triangle.
got he's got his like.
Is the whole
Definitely,
sight triangle
definitely
we go.
have,
Dr.
no,
Delaney's
as we
property?
get,
That's the answer.
it's all within our property, because as we get to the westerly property line, what's in the right of way.
Okay, so that answers the question.
Any other questions from board members?
I do, for Bill. I just want to clarify, asking my professional. Based on all this testimony, are all of your concerns alleviated, or are you still concerned about the safety?
This is what I was trying to say before, Ed. I would not personally present the testimony on behalf of an applicant that Frank just did. I'm going to tell you, Frank and I know each other a long time, even though he still doesn't know my name. Having said that, he's an extraordinarily good engineer. Okay, so I have a lot of respect for him, and that's what I'm saying. We have a difference of professional opinion here. There's a lot of judgment that's allowed. Has he addressed everything that I raised? Yes.
But that's not what I asked,
Has
though,
he
Bill.
changed my mind? No.
Okay, thank you. That was what I asked. All right, thank you.
I have a question or two. So, you've mentioned several times the fact that you have conditional approval from the county, and one of the conditions is road widening for a future expansion of West Park, is that correct?
That's correct.
Road dedication.
A road dedication. Well, right,
Even more definitive then. So that means that the title will go to the county, and the county, therefore, as you alluded to, has plans to widen that road.
See it. Into the microphone,
Can everybody hear me?
will you? Not on TV land, they can do it.
Oh, okay. For the purpose of TV land.
That'll change.
So, would it be reasonable for this board to consider that future expansion or widening of West Park? And any speed limits on it?
Just one second. Are you saying you'd perhaps have the board look at what the situation will be if in fact the roadway is widened?
That'll never happen.
Will we still have any problems or issues with regard to sight
Correct.
distances and all that? That's your question, right?
Yes, sir.
No, as basically, if you go back to A5, it shows the widening that the county has proposed or has plans for on the drawing, which is basically a center left turn lane with 2 through lanes in the shoulder, similar to what you have further east on West Park Avenue.
Is that the yellow over here?
Well, at the end of the yellow that you're showing there, it goes to a curb line. That is the future curb line of West Park Avenue. So the site triangle is measured back from that curb line. So in essence, if the county doesn't widen that, you will have even more clearance on the applicant's property to improve the sight lines. But if it is widened, you'll have the advantage of not only having the proper sight triangle put in there, but you'll have the advantage of having a shoulder area. Will provide a little bit more width of roadway for a vehicle to make adjustments. But that is
How about future speed limits with widening of that road?
well, speed limits are set. The ironic part is they're set by the actual speed that motorists are driving the roadway. That's what we look at, what we call the 85th percentile speed. In the future, I don't know if the county will address that or not. If they're going to widen the roadway, and I'm sure the town will see plans, if there is a concern for that curve, the red crest curve, that's a point that the county can take a closer look at to see what they can improve that vertical curve on. There's also the condition, where I'll go one step further, is the fact that pavements that they're allowed are to have different frictional values depending on what mix they use. So there's another factor that the county could consider. But I don't think they're at that point with the plans yet.
Also, at least at the last hearing, there was a discussion about 1 or 2 accesses from the property in question. So I think it was Mr. Fitzgerald's discussion, or it was in his report recommending if there was any access, it would be.
Well, I mean, what we discussed last time that I was involved in was, my preference would be one driveway as far east on the property as would be allowed.
Yes, and I know Dr. Laney was opposed to that.
Correct.
So I wanted to highlight that, and I didn't know if our expert has any thoughts on that, especially since you indicated that, at least based on Mr. Fitzgerald's calculations, there was some infringement, as I think you said, technically, with the existing driveway.
Well, Mr. Fitzgerald shows the different grades at every 50 feet, and it's changing, so it is varying. So I guess the first question is we would have to agree on what proper slope and at what point we would consider it. The difference is probably within feet of given the speed. As I tried to point out, there's 2 ways to look at it. I mean, I know combining driveways is one say you do that. But in my experience, when you have 2 property owners and they have to share a driveway, no matter what the agreement might be, you always can run into future conditions. Who plows the road? Who fixes it? It's too much money. It creates a little friction between property owners. However, what I tried to look at is, one, we have 2 driveways. One's proposed, which I think we both agree on, that we have adequate sight lines based upon the speed limit that's there. Secondly, if I have no history of accidents at the existing driveway, I don't personally see the need to combine them. Because we're talking about still low volume activities, 2 single family homes. They're not high generators. If this was a higher generator, let's say like the school or a ball field, then I would agree. Let's combine them and make them work. But with the two uses, that I do not see the need to. There's no overwhelming need that they should be combined, in my opinion.
That's his opinion.
Any other questions? No questions? Well, we already know that there's no one in the audience that wants to ask a question, so.
So, Mr. Gazarovski, as you indicated, you don't have any other witnesses.
I have no further
Do you
witnesses.
want to have the testimony speak for itself rather than have a closing?
Yes, both of us have been doing this for a long time, and I think that this is a small application, but a significant question. You've got the testimony of Dr. Delaney, our engineer, as well as my traffic consultant, but the most important thing is that the driveway that we seemingly have a concern for has been in existence for over 20 years with absolutely no problem. And in addition to that, it's not an intersection, it's a driveway. So there's no rush to get across the road. You're not crossing over because you've got oncoming traffic coming the other way. It's a driveway that's been functioning. And I'm not a traffic consultant, but I do think that my colleague here makes a good point. Why would you put twice as much traffic on one driveway? I mean, in my own mind, I think the application speaks for itself, and I would request that the board approve it. Thank you.
I do have a question if we're wrapping this up for the engineer.
The engineer or the traffic?
No, the engineer, not the traffic. I'm just looking at this driveway here, and about in the middle of it, there is a wetlands on the east side, right? There's wetlands in the green area.
Yes.
Is that within the buffer of the 50 feet where that driveway is going through?
Yes, it is, and I testified to some degree about that at the last
I know we
meeting.
talked about it, I just didn't know if
Didn't you
Well,
submit something?
yes, I did. I was going to say,
To talk about tonight.
subsequent to that, at the last meeting, Mr. Fitzgerald had asked that I contact the environmental consultant and obtain a letter of opinion from him, and that has been submitted to the board. Basically, and just to summarize what I said at the last meeting, is that obviously there's a number of permits, the county permit, which we've applied for and gotten a conditional approval for, this board permit, and NJDEP permits. Dr. Delaney is seeking approval from this board before he goes to the DEP. However, the environmental consultant has already got a letter of interpretation from the DEP, so we know where the wetlands are, we know where the buffer is, and he has had meetings and conversations with the DEP, and we presented in the letter that we submitted a couple of weeks ago the NJDEP citation or regulation that allows for the buffer crossing of a driveway.
So any approval, if you were to approve the application, would be conditioned on that. There'll be no subdivision until that approval is received.
That's correct. We'd have to apply and obtain that and submit that to the board as a condition of approval as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're calling that a DEP buffer?
Well, it's a
It's
driveway crossing, is it not?
Yes, it's a driveway crossing. I don't know. It's a permit by
It's a general permit.
it's a general permit that you obtain, and we meet the criteria for that.
Right, it's not transition area averaging, it's a driveway crossing.
Any other questions?
I have a comment.
No, go ahead.
Board. One of the requests of the applicant is a waiver of the tree location and preservation plan. And in my report, I recommended not granting that waiver. But quite frankly, at this point in time, it doesn't make sense, both from the township's point of view and from the applicant's point of view, to require the applicant to provide a tree location and preservation plan. Because first of all, we don't know where the development's going to be on the new lot, and we don't know when it's going to be developed. Trees grow, they die. It could be 15 years from now that it's developed, and the situation for the trees could be totally different. So my recommendation would be that if the board is inclined to approve the application, that a condition of approval be that prior to the issuance of a building permit, a tree location and preservation plan be submitted that complies with the ordinance that's in effect at that time, because the ordinance has changed too.
Of course.
And that if any waiver is requested, the applicant would have to come back to the board
Okay.
for such waiver.
So that would be have to be incorporated into any positive resolution
That's
that we did pass or not pass or
That's
whatever.
correct.
Okay. That's understood. All right.
Yeah, if I can make a comment.
Certainly.
I mean, to me, there's got to be some beautiful trees back here, and I think that's the most important thing, that we're not giving up this land and clear cutting this, and and getting rid of some canopy that really is actually rather important.
We're okay with that.
especially in this day and age.
We're okay with that.
Okay.
Okay. No other questions with the board then? Then would somebody make a motion to close the hearing and then
I make a motion.
second?
I'll second.
Mr. DeGilia?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Good?
Yes.
Mr. Sienna?
Yes.
Chairman Barili?
Yes. Would somebody make a motion to grant a positive resolution regarding this application?
And it's key here as to what conditions and whether or not you're going to permit 2 driveways or 1.
Well,
So we'll need some specificity in
Okay.
the motion that's being proposed.
Well, our application is for 2 driveways.
I understand that. So do you just want a vote up or down? No.
so in that
Mother had
respect,
an ugly child. She didn't have a stupid.
in that respect, would somebody make a motion for positive resolution regarding this application with 2 driveways? And also incorporating the other aspects that were talked about by Bill and Jim.
I did suggest you just ask for a motion by any board member.
Any board member? Any motion regarding a positive resolution regarding this application?
Are you talking to me?
Any of you?
I'll move it.
Okay.
What conditions, Mr. Vice Chair?
Conditions of the 2 driveways submitted, and Mr. Higgins' condition on
Trees.
Tree location and preservation.
And the county and the DOT. I mean, DEP.
yes.
And I'll second that.
Mr. DeGilia?
No.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Good?
Yes.
Mr. Sienna?
Yes.
Chairman Barili?
No.
You have a majority of the quorum, so the motion passes.
2 driveways, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
There you go.
So, as usual, Mr. Kozrowski will prepare a resolution of memorialization. We'll send you a copy just before the vote. And presumably, it'll be voted on next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your courtesies.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday.
Thank you.
Motion to close, please.
So moved.
Second, please.
I second.
Close the whole thing.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.